There have been a handful of levels scattered throughout more recent Mario games that have been themed around feudal Japan. These levels work in playful, cartoony aspects of traditional Japanese culture. I'm talking sliding screen doors, pagodas, ninjas, quaint villages taken over by evil bandits, and of course a guy saying, "Yo!" These levels all have a theme park-like atmosphere to them that's super fun, and of course the music must contribute to the Japanese aesthetic, which poses an interesting question. How does a Japanese game company make music that sounds particularly cartoonishly Japanese? If we break some of these tracks down into the 4 basic analytical categories of melody, harmony, rhythm, and orchestration, we immediately see some common tropes that get used consistently to get at the right atmosphere. Driving rhythms, Japanese instruments, 4th-based harmony, and an approach to melody that is more specific than just using pentatonic scales, but very much also always using pentatonic scales. So let's get into specifics. The observation that surprised me the most about analyzing some of these pieces was the rhythmic aspect. In most of these examples, a forward-leaning percussion section is the engine propelling the entire piece forward. Bowser's Castle Courtyard from Super Mario Odyssey is the best example of this. Turning Bowser's castle from a medieval European style to a traditional Japanese palace was one of the most surprising and cool ideas from this game, and the music has been stuck in my head basically since the day it came out. The wide swing feel of the 8th notes gives the music so much energy, but the groove is not something you'd typically find in Western music. This particular kind of wide swing feel is kind of similar to an American shuffle feel, but there's no backbeat emphasizing beats 2 and 4. Rather, each beat is emphasized in a pounding, driving feel, which is a perfect setting to showcase the thunderous rumbling of the Japanese taiko drums. Of course, the music uses other traditional Japanese instruments too, like the shinobue flute and 3-stringed plucked shamisen to create a Japanese atmosphere, but the featured instrument here is really the taiko. The drum part dances around the beat with syncopated rhythms, never falling into a predictable, repetitive pattern, instead answering the calls laid out by the brass section by filling in the spaces between these shots. The taiko drums have so much power and weight. They're a great instrument, and they really capture the spectacle of Bowser's grand kingdom in the game. These brass shots we just heard are a great example of the approach to harmony typical in these Japanese-flavored tracks, as the voicings are based on perfect 4th intervals. These brass hits move an E sus4 chord up a half step to an F sus4 chord, and then leap up at the end of the phrase to an A flat sus4 chord. You can see in each chord the stack of 4th intervals created by building up from the 5th to the root to the 4th. A stack of perfect 4ths like this can be inverted the way a regular triad can be inverted, giving us a stack of 4ths as the root position, a sus4 voicing as the first inversion, and a sus2 voicing as the second inversion. Each of these types of voicings have the same sound as a stack of 4ths does, which is why I will refer to different sus voicings in this video as being 4th based, even if they're not purely using a stack of 4ths, just in case you were going to be confused about that. The brass hits that follow make use of altered 4th voicings, stacking a sharp 4th, or tritone, on top of a perfect 4th, creating this deliciously crunchy chord. This voicing is doubled up the octave in the brass, giving us a semitone rub between these D sharps and the E's above them for even more crunch. These are super tasty, and they fit the atmosphere of infiltrating the Koopa King's home turf. but the less dissonant perfect fourth-based voicings are definitely more typical of this style of music. If we look at Hands-On Hall from Super Mario 3D World, we see these types of structures informing just about every part of the tune. The piece starts by establishing a driving percussion groove, once again propelling the piece rhythmically before a repeating marimba figure comes in. This figure exactly outlines an E-flat sus4 chord, immediately establishing the sound of fourth-based harmony. When the melody comes in, played by Japanese shakuhachi flutes, each note is harmonized as its own sus2 voicing. This approach to harmony is pretty vague. The notes are all pulled from the A-flat minor scale, so we get a darker minor sound, but we don't really feel a strong sense of key thanks to the fourth-based voicings. A lot of these types of tunes couple fourth-based harmony with a more standard Western minor key approach, and after a couple phrases of melody, the electric bass joins in with flat 6 and flat 7 notes, which set up a resolution to the piece's key of A-flat minor. These notes are functionally very straightforward, but they interact with the sus2 structures on top in really cool ways. These F-flat notes, combined with these A-flat sus2 or E-flat sus4 chords add up to a colorful F-flat major 7 sharp 11. Whereas the same structures over top of our G-flat bass note make a G-flat 6-9 chord. The energetic slap bass accompaniment underneath the melody and harmony creates this fun, theme park-esque portrayal of traditional Japanese culture, and this interplay between Western harmony and fourth-based harmony creates some really cool colors. The Ninja Village theme from Princess Peach Showtime shows us the exact same approach, taking a moving, functional bass line and having each note color the static fourth-based voicing on top in a slightly different way. After this intro outlining a D sus chord, we get these offbeat piano chord stabs built from G, A, C, and D notes. Rearranged, these notes form a stack of perfect fourths, going up from A to C, but you can also think of it as a D7 sus chord. The bass notes underneath go from D to F to G to C and repeat, a very functional and tonal D minor progression that contrasts the ambiguity of the harmony above it. The harmony does evolve toward the end of the piece, moving from the key of D minor to a dissonant, winding progression centered around a C minor type of sound. I say type of sound because it's not your typical C minor. This first chord sees the koto, another traditional Japanese stringed instrument, rippling down an arpeggio of G, D, C, and A flat notes. Over top of the C bass note, it's like a C sus2 add flat 6 chord, or maybe an A flat major 7 flat 5 over C. It's certainly not a typical Western sound. To understand this sound, we need to talk about the scales used in traditional Japanese sounding music, namely pentatonic scales. A pentatonic scale is any scale made up of 5 separate notes, and the default pentatonic scale we think of is made up of the root, 2nd, 3rd, 5th, and 6th of a major key. The minor pentatonic scale that's just as common, or maybe even more common, in modern music is really just a mode of this major pentatonic scale, featuring all of the same intervals but starting on the relative minor note. These get used in Japanese sounding music all the time, but for our Ninja Village example, we need to explore a more complex pentatonic scale native to Japan called the Hirajoshi Scale. Our regular pentatonic scale is known for its inoffensiveness as it contains only pleasant intervals, but the Hirajoshi scale contains 2 semitones within its 5-note configuration. Starting on C here, we have the root, 2nd, flat 3rd, 5th, and flat 6th. You can think of it like the major pentatonic scale, with the 1, 2, 3, 5, 6 pattern, but based on a minor key, with the flattened 3rd and 6th. Or you can think about a minor triad with both of the juiciest, most tragic-sounding natural minor notes attached to it. Either way, this scale is most famously known as the basis for Sakura Sakura, a Japanese folk song written in the 17th century, and so is forever tied to the sound of traditional Japanese culture. The 2nd and flat 6th are very colorful notes in a minor key, and the mixing of semitone leaps with major 3rd leaps, huge jumps to make in a scale, give the Hirajoshi scale a really interesting, uneven quality. The Shogun Studios entrance music from Paper Mario: The Origami King also features a section based on the C Hirajoshi scale, running down the scale in this high flute and xylophone part. While doing some research into the Hirajoshi scale, I found there's not one universally agreed upon parent mode of the scale. This Shogun Studios example shows off the scale over an A-flat bass note, which gives us the major 7th and sharp 11th over top of that A-flat to evoke a Lydian type of sound. The same scale over a C bass note in our Super Mario 3D World example gave a very dark C minor kind of sound. And the Hirajoshi scale starting on an A, giving us A, B, C, E, F, is used in Bowser's Castle Courtyard over top of an E to F to G progression to give us a very colorful E Phrygian sound. Whatever the harmonic context, thanks to its use in historical Japanese music and its difference from normal Western scales, the Hirajoshi scale is excellent at bringing out a Japanese aesthetic with a darker quality. Now, your basic major or minor pentatonic scales can certainly get the job done as the basis for a Japan-themed melody, and we see this in the other sections of the Shogun Studios music that shift to the key of C major. The opening line is just running straight up and down the C major pentatonic scale, and then after the, once again, driving percussion groove is established, the melody comes in over top with a straight walk up the pentatonic scale from the 5th to the 2nd of the key. The trick to making these melodies feel Japanese is to once again think in terms of fourth-based sounds, like the sus2 and sus4 triads that littered our earlier examples. There are lots of ways to use the pentatonic scale that don't sound remotely Japanese, but if you emphasize leaps that are less triadic and more angular, specifically in a way that creates fourth-based shapes, things start to sound a lot more Eastern. In fact, if we just take these 4 melody notes from Shogun Studios, we see that they can be arranged in a stack of perfect fourths, once again evoking that traditional fourth-based sound. Of course, harmonizing the melody a fourth below also greatly contributes to this effect. The melody to the Pagoda Peak theme from Mario Party 7 uses tons of these fourth-based shapes in its melody, which is made up entirely of the G-flat major pentatonic scale. I'll highlight all of the perfect fourth, sus2 and sus4 shapes used in the melody while we listen through it. Wait a sec. Is that supposed to be Chinese? Ooh, is it bad that I couldn't tell the difference? Another example that's actually going for a Chinese aesthetic, I'm not racist, you're racist, is Mario Kart 8's Dragon Driftway, which uses a ton of these types of melodic shapes in the tune's B section. The main melody plays off of a D sus2 triad, which works its way down to end the phrase on an E sus4 triad, played beautifully by the erhu. The final piece of the puzzle to make it a true feudal Japanese sounding track is to close the piece off with some shamisen shredding. Take it away. Quick, driving, minor pentatonic shredding is very idiomatic for the shamisen, which creates a ton of energy and is the perfect way to draw an arrangement to a close and bring the music back to the top of the loop. Traditional Japanese music made use of all of these elements to some degree: driving drum rhythms, fourth-based harmony and melodies, pentatonic scales of the regular and Hirajoshi variety, and of course the use of Japanese instruments like the shamisen or shakuhachi or koto or what have you. These are the elements that stand out as being unique to Japanese music and sound especially distinct in comparison to typical Mario music. We usually get just one of these Japan-themed levels per Mario game, but listening to all of this music side by side, the similarities become very clear. I always love these levels, and it's so fun to see how Japanese composers tackle cartoonishly Japanese-themed music like this. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.